Imagine if you could tap into your inner potential and lead yourself to greatness. What if mastering self leadership is the key to unlocking your best self?
Today, we dive into how to become the leader of your own sales career.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Secrets in Medical Device Sales brought to you by the Girls of Grit. We are so excited. You guys keep tuning in. And today we have another very fun, very exciting episode.
Good morning, everybody. Yes, we are on Power Play number 7. Gosh, these have just been flying by, I think, anyway. Today's Power Play, I think, is really a great one, and it can be interpreted in many different ways. Today, we're talking about leadership, but we're putting leadership in the context of leading ourselves in your sales territory, or maybe you are in a medical device role and you are a leader and you're in a leadership role. So we just kind of wanted to take a little bit today and kind of focus this a little bit more on how do you lead yourself. And I'm just going to start with the definition of what actual leadership is, and then we'll kick it off. So leadership is the ability to guide, influence, and inspire individuals or groups toward achieving common goals and objectives. To take it a step further, I did kind of look at just common qualities across the board, whether it's leadership books, leadership courses, or when you think of a leader, what qualities you see in a person that maybe you also find a strength in yourself. So common qualities you will find in a leader are integrity, empathy, vision, communication, accountability, confidence, resilience, and decision making.
I love all of those. And as I'm sitting here, Cindy, I think all of us probably want to believe and think that we are all leaders to some extent, right? And if we're high performers, we should be leaders to some extent. So I think today's episode is really going to be neat because we all have that very initial thought of, oh, well, I know what a leader is. But I think as we run through this today, I think you guys might maybe change your mind a little bit on exactly what a leader is. Maybe not totally, but there's more to it than just the title, than just, well, that person is a CEO, so they must be a leader. There's more to it than that. And I think today when we talk about things, we're going to really uncover it. And we're also going to talk about some qualities or traits that maybe some of us have that we need to change in order to really be that true leader. I think it's really important because as you and I were talking about this, Cindy, I believe at least, and you and I were agreeing on this, that you have to be able to lead yourself before you lead others. You have to define your own path and lead yourself down that path successfully before you can lead others. And I think that's a really key thing to remember because sometimes we get so caught up in what we want to do next and what we want to do next. And, oh, I want to move to this position or that position. But we forget that we really need to master where we're at. And that in and of itself can be a leader.
Absolutely. And in the theme of today, just to set the stage, we're not really going to talk about leadership styles so much. It's more just about leadership qualities. So I want to read a quote by John C. Maxwell that many of you know is known to, I would say, the general public and many people out there as a leader of leaders.
Absolutely.
Like the influencer. So John C. Maxwell said, a leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. That's one of my favorite quotes. When you think about leadership, at the end of this podcast, let us know if your opinion changes some. And if you agree with what John C. Maxwell just said and how leadership fits into your role. So Lisa, why don't we just kind of start talking a little bit about why leadership is so important? Because sometimes you're in your own territory, in your own business or your own team. Like what problems are we trying to solve? What ways can leadership help us grow?
Absolutely.
So I'm just going to start off with one that I think is really important because I think that lack of vision and direction is one of the very first things that can steer you away from leadership. Like if you don't have that, you can kind of struggle. Like, what are your goals? Where are you trying to go? You can be confused. And when you don't have a vision, you're unproductive. You don't have something you're shooting for. And I think one of the main qualities of leadership is being able to have a good vision. I think one issue is if you don't have this vision, it can be a problem.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. And you and I were talking, and you mentioned a really great example of someone that just could not seem to have a good vision, a good direction, make decisions, which is another quality that you really need to be able to do. But we just did a podcast on vision. And if you guys haven't listened to it, go back and listen to it. I think it was our power play number 5,
Six or
6. Sorry. It's one of those. Anyhow, we've already talked about it. There's so many. But vision is key, right, to being a high performer. And so if you don't know how to create a vision, go back, listen to that episode, and really learn how to have a vision if you don't have one. And sometimes it's, well, I have a vision. It's a pie in the sky. Like I have a house on the beach, but there's more to it than just that. I think it's really important if you guys don't know how to create a vision to go back, because that is a key quality of being a leader, is to always have that vision and direction.
So yes, I'll share the story that Lisa and I were discussing when this made me think of this. Years ago, I had a coworker that really, I didn't notice it at first, but he really had no vision and no self-direction. So he heavily relied on his manager for the simple things. And he had a fabulous manager. I mean, this manager was one of those great people, would step in and help and do things. And then the manager one day actually got promoted. And it was so evident after the manager left how he seemed like a little lost puppy. He couldn't make a decision. He didn't know where to go. He wouldn't do anything. It was almost like paralysis by analysis. Thought too much about this. I mean, when you think about a general sales role, every day you're out there, every day you're going. If you don't have a vision of what you're going for, you're not going to be able to ever advance in your career, your growth, your sale, or anything. So eventually this person ended up leaving. His numbers kind of tanked and he just resigned.
Wow.
I don't
What a
think he was
shame.
fired.
That's such a shame.
Yes.
And it's
I
not hard to
agree.
do. It's not hard to do.
No.
You just have to work on it. You just have to put your mind to it and create your vision. Another thing that you're talking about along with him is decision making, right? You got to be able to be a good decision maker. It doesn't mean that you're always going to make the right decisions, because listen, we're not perfect. Everybody makes mistakes. Sometimes you make a decision and you're like, ooh, that was probably the wrong decision. But then you learn from them and you move on. You change, you pivot, you go to the next things. But you have to be able to be decisive in certain moments, whether that's in a case or that's, hey, I'm going to call on this account versus this account. And these are the reasons why. And you really got to be decisive on that. I mean, I was talking with somebody and they're like, oh my gosh, just getting into a new territory. I've got all these opportunities, but I don't know where to go. I don't know where to start. Well, sit down, make a spreadsheet, and then make a move. Because if you get paralyzed by paralysis by analysis, then you're not going to be able to move forward regardless. So you have to be able to make good decisions and decisive decisions.
And what you just said kind of links into another one is communication. So if you have poor communication, that's a problem. So effective leaders really are transparent. In my mind, I think back to managers that I had or higher up in leadership. And one of the first things that comes to mind is strong communication. They're transparent, they're clear. When you have poor communication, you have decreased morale. You don't really trust them because you don't really know what's going on. And when you have poor communication, what does that lead to? Assumption. And assumptions are never good for anybody. So I think that's something to also consider as a problem when you don't have good leadership.
And you know what? I love that. And along with that communication, in your definition, you talked about empathy. I think that it's so important as a leader not to just yell at others, but have empathy, right? Self-awareness, and be aware of how you're speaking to others. Whether or not you're in a leadership, quote unquote, position, you're a leader of yourself. You need to be able to communicate with others empathetically, very decisively, but not in a way that you're yelling or pushing an idea or forcing somebody to have to listen to you. I think it's so key in that communication that you are very self-aware and aware of everybody else too. So I think that's another key thing. And again, you don't need to be in a position of power. You're a sales rep, just like me. But when we communicate, it's very important to be aware of how you're communicating, what you're trying to get across.
So there was a post actually on LinkedIn. And when you just said that, I was just like, what was it? What was it? When you talk about when managers either yell or just miscommunicate, this was the quote. The quote is by Justin Wright. When you manage by fear, you make people focus on avoiding mistakes instead of doing their best work. True leadership inspires confidence, not anxiety. And that really caught my attention. Just something different. Not that it went along exactly what you said, but it just popped in my mind. I was like, oh, wait, there was a really good quote I heard about leadership.
That's a
And,
great quote.
but I think too that it's not what you say, it's how you say it. I mean, that's something we've mentioned before in communication. So, one other area I think is a problem when you don't have leadership for yourself or your team is really decreased motivation and engagement. And that kind of goes
Mm.
along with my story of the guy that just kind of was lost. Once his manager didn't do everything for him, he had no motivation. He didn't engage. If the manager wasn't going to plan a dinner and go somewhere or make the meeting or lead the meeting, he just sat in the passenger seat the whole time. Leaders are in the driver's seat. When you don't motivate others, or, okay, when I say others, it doesn't have to just be that you're the manager of a team of a number of people. Motivating others could be your customers. You're leading your team. And when you engage them, then you're productive and you get this great momentum. And that's really, really important. I think that fits along again with the areas that where leadership can really help solve is if you have decreased motivation.
I love that. I think that's really actually quite important. I didn't really think about it, but you're right. If as a leader in your own territory, regardless of where you're at, you have to always be positive and motivating. You cannot just carry this, oh, woe is me, poor is me attitude, because number one, nobody wants to be around that. And number two, I love your idea of be the driver in the driver's seat at all times. Don't ever be the passenger, because when you're the passenger, it leads to complacency. And look, we're all out there to sell more, be more successful, make it to President's Club. You have to be in the driver's seat at all times. And again, that's what a true leader embodies. We did an episode, a fantastic interview. No, if you haven't listened to it yet, you guys have got to listen to it. It's actually one of our highest episodes listened to on a true successful female in the medical device world. And her name is Patricia Choquette. I cannot remember off the top of my head what episode it was, Cindy, but dang it, man. If you want to be inspired to be a true leader in your own territory, listen to hers, because I can tell you this, guys, she is always in the driver's seat and she's probably driving a Ferrari at all times because she is just so phenomenal, but she embodies that. And hey, she's a sales rep. She's not the director, VP, CEO. She is of her own territory though, and she is absolutely owning it every day. So I think what we just talked about, Cindy, these are such key things to remind ourselves, to be aware of, to work on. And so with that, I think we should probably now roll into some of the ways to build these leadership skills, right?
Exactly. But I think what you just said segued into one of the most important parts of our episode, and that is revealing the secret.
Oh,
the secret that
forget about the secret. What's wrong with me?
Well, you really just talked about it, and it's so crazy. We believe there's secrets behind every piece of information that we give you. And we give you this because we really want to help you focus. There's so many things. We can say leadership, okay? And then you could finish this podcast and be like, well, where do I go from here? What's the thing to take? And we want you to use our secrets as a takeaway. We want you to really think about leadership and how you can embody it, embrace it in your own territory, in your own team, or whatever role you're in. So to reveal our secret, our Girls at Grit secret for leadership, it is, what is it, Lisa?
Ownership. You have to own it. Own every minute of every day. And you just gave such a great example because, a lot of times we listen to these podcasts and we're like, ooh, we're so inspired. And then something happens and it completely just shifts us off course. And I think this is a really good one to remind you that you have to own it every day, every minute, every hour. You have to own your own leadership trail or path. And that is the key to it. I mean, I think once you own your decisions, you own the way you're going to handle your business, you own everything about your territory, you are being a leader of yourself. And that is so key.
Absolutely. Now off with the fun part. Here you are, all high performers, and let's really kind of link the relationship between leadership and high performance. And we've already talked about how leaders are inspiring. They inspire their peers, their customers, their coworkers, actually upper management at times too. But it's not just about that. It's really your self-motivation. And it's navigating a lot of challenges that you may have. Ownership is owning up when things go bad, adapting to change, and you can jump in and do it. So let's kind of go through key leadership qualities that we see for sales. And I'll go ahead and start with number one. because we touched on it. And I just think I just want to reiterate, this is all part of ownership, is one of the key qualities of leadership is vision. High performers really need to see just hitting behind the quota. It's that long-term strategy. It's looking way down the road. And every little bit of what you do each day is a piece of it. We talk about one of the things we do on this podcast is we try to give you tips and little hints for everyday excellence. Because if you're excellent every day, you can only end up with a great result at the end. And that's not saying that you're perfect every day. If you did one good thing very well every day, think about the difference that would make.
That's such a good point. And right along with it, like you just mentioned, another key quality to have as a leader is resilience, because everybody gets knocked down. Everybody has a bad day, bad sale, bad case, bad customer call. It's what you do with that situation that makes the difference. When you have the ability to look at this as not as a setback, but a set up for something bigger, greater down the road, you have to be able to be resilient, flip the script, and be able to change and pivot and move forward. Because when we get caught up in the bad things, they can really take us down an ugly hole. And man, I mean, that right there, that's a motivation killer. Everybody's like, oh, I don't want to be around her. She's super depressing right now. You can't be like that. You have to be resilient, right? And again, we all face these. I mean, I faced them many times. I still face them all the time. It is a true mind shift and a change that you have to have.
Absolutely. Emotional intelligence is another key quality in leadership. And we have talked about this. This is one of our, I think it was like power play number 3, maybe. But, you know, empathy goes along with emotional intelligence, and you're really understanding what other people need and what motivation they need to build a relationship or to influence your customer or to ultimately help that patient at the end of the day. And it's feeling your way out. It's following your instincts. And again, that's another great one to go back and listen to, which is great. Yep. So vision, resilience, emotional intelligence, just to focus a little bit more on qualities, which there are many, but I feel that this wraps into ownership of the conversation we're having today about leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So let's talk about some skills, because these are things, I mean, some people argue a leader is born or they're made. Well, I think it's a little bit of both. And I think for today's discussion, we're going to give you guys some easy skills that you can use to build your leadership. So maybe you already are a leader. Maybe you're already a high performer, but nobody's perfect every day. And there's always ways to improve. So I think these skills really help remind us of how to keep on that top level of leadership, whether it's in our territory, it's leading a team, or it's leading a company. So one of the biggest things is, and you love these, Cindy, is setting clear goals. Always have that list of goals either in your mind, well, probably written down on a sheet of paper, and you're running through them. You have to have those goals. And we talked about how to set goals in one of our earlier episodes. I think it was like the one for the beginning of 2025. But it's so key to be able to create these long-term goals as well as short-term goals so that they keep you on the path to success and they keep you on that leadership path versus just getting derailed. I don't know where to go. I don't know who to call on next.
So true. A second leadership skill for our high-performing sales professionals is building trust. Because trust, I don't know about you, but I feel like it is the pillar, the foundation. That's what everything is built on. You know, high performers really need to establish credibility with your customers as well as your coworkers, your team. And I tell you, when you have a leader you can trust, it is just unbelievable. It's exciting. Don't you think that just builds on motivation and all the other things we just said?
Absolutely. I think trust needs to be underscored, underlined, put in caps. There is so much to be said about trust. And that is something that true leaders absolutely have. I think by a sales point of view, a salesperson point of view, your customers have to trust you. And customers aren't just physicians, they're nurses, they're techs, they're office managers. They're people that when they see you, they're like, oh, she's got it. She's bringing in a good product. She's trustworthy. She's not just out there for the sale. She really cares about our patients. That's so important as it relates to being a manager or a VP or a CEO. Cindy, actually, I can't imagine, well, I can, but being led by somebody who I don't trust really can lead people down the wrong road, because when you don't have that trust at that upper level, it's kind of hard to work for somebody that you don't trust, right? So it's the same thing in a
Yeah.
relationship. How are you supposed to be in a relationship with someone, personal, if you can't trust them? So I think that trust is so key. And I'm so glad you brought that up. And you guys, how do you build that? You build that by being honest. You build that by being vulnerable, authentic, true to yourself, have other people in mind at all times. You are there to serve others, not yourself. That will build trust.
Absolutely. The third one we've already mentioned, so I'm just going to quickly outline it, but I want you to kind of think about these like in order. But the third one is effective communication. I think that's something that we can communicate over and over again. But remember, kind of the art of communication begins with listening. It is so important to listen first. And that when you listen and then kind of articulate different ideas, it really helps you both establish where you're going. So, another takeaway about communication, body language, listening, talk is listening. Number one, listening.
Oh, I struggle with that, Cindy. That is
Hey,
really a hard one
we
for
all can
me.
have room for growth.
Girl, that and patience, man. I need to work on those things. Anybody will tell you that. One of the other things that we touched on and is still really important, and it brings me back to that example that you mentioned with the rep that just totally depended on the manager for everything, is decision making. You have to be able to make decisions. And yes, sometimes there are really tough decisions to be made. And that's when you look to your mentors. That's when you look to people that you trust, that are leaders in a company or even outside the company, that can say to you, hey, Cindy, hey, Lisa, this is how I would look at this situation. This is what I would do. Take these factors into consideration. Nobody is at fault for looking outside of your own self to make a decision. I mean, that's why companies hire third parties sometimes to look at data, analyze it, and then make a decision, the best decision in their minds for the company. So there's nothing wrong with outsourcing for a decision, but you also got to trust yourself. You got to have that gut instinct of saying, this is the right decision, and then you got to be able to back it up.
That is so awesome. And, those four skills we just mentioned, setting goals, building trust, effective communication, and decision making are really key things that we can all work on. Along with what you mentioned first is a mindset shift. But the last area I think is really key. And the last area to really kind of help develop your leadership is resources that you can seek out for personal growth. It's reading books. You can attend workshops. You can find a mentor in actually your company or outside in different groups. There's so many different things you can do. Listen to podcasts, Audible. And I think that when you reach out and just extend your own self to betterment, that's where you see a lot of change happen.
Oh, that is so good. We did an episode on lifelong learning, right? I mean, that
Yes,
was like,
we did.
yeah. So again, go back and listen to that one. Man, I swear we talk about so much good stuff. But you're right. There's so many different ways to be a bigger, better resource, not just for yourself, but for others. And there's so many different ways. And it's important that we always are continuing to grow. I mean, that's why we do this podcast, Cindy, to help others continue to grow, to be better high performers. That's what we're all searching for, right? So I think that's
Absolutely.
super key. And so I think today we talked about a lot of stuff. Leadership is such a key quality to being a high performer. I actually don't know if you can be a high performer and not have leadership, because it's almost in and of itself, right? All of the qualities that we talked about as being a leader are things that make you a high performer. So if you seem to be struggling, and maybe just one of these areas, right? Maybe it's just, hey, I really am struggling with building that trust. Well, go back, re-listen to the episode again and really understand. Look it up, be a resource. Go find some books on how to build trust with customers. There's so many great things out there for you guys to really build yourselves up. And we are just here to help remind you of that everyday excellence and what it takes to really be a high performer.
And we want you to take our secret today of ownership. So pick one area that you think you could grow today, one area that could just get you one step closer to either being a better leader that you already are or stepping into leadership, starting with your own self, your own territory, and then maybe someday a team or greater team or many other levels. Because we believe everybody that listens to these podcasts is able to do anything they set their mind to in their career. So let's tie it back into our call to action that we mentioned earlier in the beginning of this episode. John C. Maxwell said, a leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. So our call to action is this. Are you what John Maxwell said? And from the beginning of this episode, has your take on leadership changed? If so, how? And what one piece of leadership quality can you take ownership in today to step in to greater leadership for your territory, region, and sales career?